Hi everyone, and welcome to Compliance Panel's live webinar on the Quality System Records, Origin and Controls. My name is David Benjamin, and I'm going to be your host today. And on behalf of the Compliance Panel team, I would like to say thank you for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Chuck Cefalo. Chuck is employed as a Regulatory Affairs Specialist for Analogic Corporation in Peabody, Massachusetts. Chuck has been with Analogic for the last 21 years in various roles related to quality assurance and regulatory. He has been responsible for the establishment and maintenance of quality management systems for both foreign and domestic products. And he has a bachelor's degree from Franklin Pierce University and a graduate certificate in medical device regulatory affairs from Northeastern University. Now, before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outlined for today's event. The webinar is for 60 minutes duration. First, Chuck will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that would be covered, and he would then share with you his presentation. Now, we would like to inform all participants once part of the teleconference have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A window begins towards the end of the webinar. It is for the purpose of avoiding discontinuity and for allowing our presenter to speak clearly so that everyone present can take maximum benefit from this event. And we also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. And if for any reason you get locked out of this training session, we request you all to follow the same procedure to join in again. And now that we're all ready to start, I request Chuck to take it from here.
Okay, David, thank you. And good afternoon, good morning to all of you, wherever you may be. And on behalf of the Compliance Panel, I'd just like to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we can both learn something from this session, me from your questions and you from the presentation. First of all, before we start, I have a little disclaimer that I have to do is that all information and views expressed in this article are those of myself and do not necessarily represent those of my employer, Analogic Corporation. That being said, let's start. Okay, some goals and objectives that I hope to accomplish today is, first of all, identify quality system records, identify quality record origins, where they come from, and the control mechanisms that go along with maintaining quality records, and also identify what are non-quality records. And also, if at any time, or probably early in this, if you cannot hear me good enough, please send a chat message to the host, and he'll let me know that I need to speak up. Okay. Non-quality records would be those documents which are contained in your device master record, in your device history record. These are records that are required for you to maintain and produce medical devices or any other product for that matter if you're under an ISO quality system. So this is the product-specific documentation, bill of materials, specification, test procedures. Those types of things are non-quality records, although the documentation or the records that produced these items are quality records, and we'll get into those in more depth. But I just want to upfront say that these are not the documents that we'll be talking about today, other than how they influence the preparation and the establishment of a quality record. First of all, what is a quality record? Here's a definition and from 21 CFR Part 820 that each manufacturer shall maintain a quality system record. Well, it doesn't give you much of a definition of what a record is, but it says the QSR shall include or refer to the location of procedures and the documentation of activities required by this part that are not specific to a particular type of devices, including but not limited to the records required by a 2020 and the other design history file, the device master record, the device history record. Okay, and you'll find similar clauses in ISO 9001. You'll find similar clauses in ISO 13485, and for risk management, you'll find similar clauses in 14971. So although they don't define, the FDA doesn't define specifically what a quality record is, it does tell you that you need to document the activities. Anywhere it says you'll have a documented record, which is pretty much in almost every paragraph of the Part 820 quality management regulation that you'll need to have some type of record to show that you actually performed the task that they're requiring you to perform. And you'll see the same thing in 9001 and 13485 and 14971. So this is pretty much where they're defined and where the source comes from. So one quality record that is oftentimes overlooked is your quality policy. Every organization is required to have a quality policy if you're being approved to an ISO standard. So how and where it's defined, how it's relayed to all personnel in the company, and how is it implemented. So when an ISO auditor or your notified body comes in, they ask any employee that they happen to come across during the course of their audit, what is the quality policy? So they need to know where it's defined and how it's relayed to all personnel, whether it be part of your orientation training or whether it be part of an annual training program or an ongoing training program, that your quality policy is implemented and defined, and that all personnel understand where it can be found and what its meaning is. There's hundreds of different quality policies which all pretty much have the same function, and that is identify your customers' needs and satisfy those needs with continuous improvement. I mean, some form of that statement is normally what a company's quality policy is. And the quality policy itself should be directed to the employees through the executive management of the company. The executive management should somehow disseminate the information of the quality policy either through your quality manual or through, a lot of people have signs or they give you a handbook when you come in. But a quality policy, in my mind, is the first quality record that should be addressed as part of your quality management system. The next segment of quality records would be the management review. And this is something that is often, I don't want to say underachieved, but a lot of times the management review doesn't cover everything that the standards are looking for. I know from the FDA side, they really can't look at your management review as part of their investigation, but you should have something in place to show that you performed one, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But just to go over some of the things that are included in a management review, and these in themselves are all quality records. So the results of audits should be included in your management review. Any post-market surveillance activities that are done, service reports, complaints, all those should be included in the management review. Your design control activities and the status of each project. So as part of the annual management review, or whether you do a quarterly management review or even twice a year, at some point you should say, at this point in time, here are all my design activities. These are all the products which I have going through the design process, and here is the status of each project. The next thing that should be included is process performance and product conformity. These are your quality control records. How are my processes performing, and what is the conformity? What are my yields through my manufacturing process, and how can I improve on these? To continue with management review, status of any preventive and corrective action. And I'll get into CAPA a little bit further on through the presentation. And then follow-up actions from previous management reviews. Did we have any actions? Did we have any CAPAs? Did we have any goals? At the bottom of this slide, the goals and objectives for the next period. Did we meet our goals for the last period? And why didn't we meet those goals? Do we need to make some changes to our process or to our quality management system? Are there any changes that could affect the quality management system? For instance, the change to the MDD, which came out in September of 2007, which is now going to be required in March of 2010. Those changes, how does that affect my quality management system? Are there things in there that need to be implemented? Results of risk management processes. Excuse me, have we managed to limit the risks as well as possible in all of our products? And where are some recommendations for improvement? So as the executive management performs this review, obviously all this information has to be fed to them somehow because they're not the ones who are going to capture all this information. But it has to be in a format where they can go through this list and make the right decisions or make the correct review so that the quality system moves in the direction that you want it to move into, and that's the continuous improvement process. One other thing here would be new or revised regulatory requirements. If there's been changes, again, like I said, for the MDD, but in other places, like if there are IEC standards that you go by and they've been revised or new releases in there, that's where you should check for that. So these are all the areas where management review should cover, and that there's an awareness by executive management for all these. And each one of these in themselves are quality records, and we'll look at these individually now as we go through the remainder of the webinar. First of all, it's internal audit records. Now, most organizations have an internal audit group either through their corporate group or they have people designated as auditors that are obviously not directly responsible for the areas that they're auditing. So one set of quality records would be the audit reports. And included in those would be open findings and nonconformities that were found during the internal audit and the associated CAPAs. So if it was necessary to implement a CAPA as part of an audit, that trail should lead back all the way back to the audit report itself, so that when the auditor goes back, he can see that I had this open finding, there was a nonconformity, it was addressed, and the associated CAPA was implemented during the process of implementing the corrections necessary for the audit. Sorry, there's a question here. Slide 8 bullet, please specify MDD changes that will become effective 2010. This was from Marco. Unfortunately, Marco, that would take up pretty much the full hour to go through all that, and there is another session planned in a couple of months ahead. So I would love to, if there's time at the end, I can talk about some of that, but I'll wait till we get to that. So we'll wait till the question and answer session. If I have some time, I will get into that. And then there's external audit records. You have the records, the quality records that are performed by your external auditors, whether it be the FDA, whether it be your notified body, whether it be a customer. Hopefully you don't have open findings and nonconformities, but those are part of quality records. Additionally, the FDA is not allowed to look at your external audit records or your internal audit records for that matter, and your supplier audits are not, they're not privy to look at. However, you do need to have something in place, much like the management review, that they can't look at. So you should put a memo to file that says on these dates an audit was performed of this product or this division or this group, and there were so many nonconformities found, and at this point in time all nonconformities have been addressed, and you keep that letter on file so that when the FDA does come in, you can say, here's where I performed my management review, here's where I performed my internal audits, and here's a record of an external audit that was performed. And again, external audits would be handled much like internal audits. Any open findings and nonconformities become quality records. Any associated CAPAs, the follow-up activities, and any responses that were required as part of that audit, excuse me, will all become part of a quality record. Now, when your notified body comes in, they obviously have they obviously have the right to look at your management reviews, and they'll spend time on management review, whether it's a surveillance audit or a full conformance audit. They'll look at your management reviews probably as one of the first items they look at, and also any of your internal audits. So it's very important that these are documented properly, because it could save you a deviation, say, from your notified body if they realize that, hey, you've already looked at this area, you've captured this in an audit finding, and you're addressing it out front, so there's it's not necessary for me to document this again, unless obviously the period of time from when your internal auditor found the nonconformity, and there's been a large period of time in between the time that the nonconformity was found and it hasn't been addressed yet. That may be another issue, that you're not addressing your internal findings in a timely manner. But these, again, would be all quality records. Supplier audits. And this past Wednesday of last week, I attended a conference in Boston, which is an FDA update conference, which is held every year by Mass Medic Association. And there was Kimberly Troutman from the FDA who was there, and another consultant who handles quality management systems. And the amount of time they spent on suppliers was about half of the day of the conference, between the FDA's view of how suppliers are being handled and the consultants that were there also speaking about suppliers. And it has become a very, very visible item in the eyes of the FDA on how you handle your suppliers. And this is mainly due to a lot of the outsourcing that is going outside of country. And they're very, very scrutinizing how you are handling your suppliers, that what is the level of control required for any particular supplier, so that you've defined if this is an item that is very low risk to your product, that you don't need to have the same controls. You don't need to maybe go to visit that supplier on an annual basis or a biannual basis, or even go visit them at all if you're buying something out of a catalog. But if it's something that you've designed, that you're having this supplier make for you, and they're a sole source for this product, they're the only people that you found that have the technology for this item that you're having them make, that the risk assessment associated with that supplier would show that this is a very high-risk item, and that you need to really put some controls, very stringent controls on that supplier to make sure that they don't change anything without letting you know, that their process doesn't change, or that their raw materials don't change. So these are things you need to look at as you go through a supplier audit, and that as you implement the program for supplier audits, so that you can have the traceability back when your supplier audit records are observed by either the FDA or by your notified body or by your internal auditors, that you've got the proper level of control for any particular part, that you've done a supplier risk assessment, that the frequency of the supplier audits is well defined, and that any follow-up actions required for the supplier audits have been performed, so that these records are available and the traceability is there. One of the presenters at the conference I was at from the FDA talked about how they go from they're currently, as they do an investigation at your facility, they'll go from one part on the floor and work its way right back through the incoming inspection process, through to the supplier, to how the supplier was actually qualified and why the supplier was qualified in the manner that it was. So you can see that they're now placing a lot of emphasis on supplier control. And I was very surprised to see that shift from where they were looking at design control so much over the last 10 years since they've implemented the design control requirements, that they're now shifting to supplier audits. And this is due to, obviously, some of the situations that have come from China, for instance, the heparin incident that happened, and more recently I read of where a large quantity of titanium from one smelter in China made its way into 150 different medical device manufacturers, and it was a bad lot of titanium. And titanium is used in, you know, pins, artificial knees, artificial joint parts. So that's why they're placing so much emphasis on suppliers now, because this has become so global. And if you're familiar with the Global Harmonization Task Force, the GHTF, you can go to their website, and they've just issued a couple of documents, one associated with CAPA, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and one associated with supplier controls. From Byron Rice, how about customer supplied raw material? The same level. It depends on the risk associated with that raw material. If it's something that's going to be used as part of a manufacturing process and discarded at the end, or if it's something like solder, which is going to be a permanent part of the part, or if it's plastics or a reagent or something to that effect, then the risk associated with that raw material is going to be a lot higher than if it's something that's going to be discarded as part of the manufacturing process. So again, you have to assess the risk of the raw material in order to implement the level of control that's going to be required for that particular raw material, and that's the traceability that the FDA and notified bodies are looking for these days. Thank you for that question. That's a very good question. Product assurance records. Again, these aren't in any particular order, but product assurance, some organizations have the luxury of having a product assurance department which handles compliance to recognized standards such as IEC 60601, to the various sterility standards, to biocompatibility standards. So product assurance records are also a very important part of the design control side. What is the reliability study that's been done on your product? Have you done reliability growth testing? Have you done accelerated life testing? Those types of things. Transportation test. Excuse me, if you have a very small device or a small product in your packaging, you know, you may be putting 1,000 in a box, the transportation testing associated with that is going to be a lot different than if you're shipping, say, a complete CT system in a large crate that has to go from the United States either by boat or by air freight to Europe or to, you know, South America. So the level of product assurance testing, again, would depend on the complexity of your device. MTBF evaluations, whether you use MTTF, mean time to failure, if it's a disposable, or MTBF if it's mean time between failures for a system type product. Those types of evaluations should be done, and you should have records associated with those as part of the design controls. Again, I spoke about accelerated life testing and any NRTL reports. If you have a company like UL or CSA or Intertech or one of those companies come in and perform testing of your product, those reports are also quality records and should be there. I have a question here. Is product assurance in addition to quality assurance? Product assurance is more of an engineering function. Product assurance could be part of the quality assurance group, but typically quality assurance would review or dictate to the product assurance department what testing has to be done for a particular product. And again, it rolls all the way up to the contract with a customer. if you're doing something OEM, or if you have something that you're direct sales on, and competitive-wise, you want to be, you want to have better reliability than your competition. You want to be able to say, my biocompatibility is there in any reports that have to go to the FDA, particularly if you're submitting a 510K or a PMA, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But typically, product assurance is in addition to quality assurance, but it can be two different functions. It can be product assurance, I've seen, is part of the engineering department. More you'd call compliance engineering, and in some organizations it's part of the regulatory group, so that it does have the independence from engineering. But in all cases, it's independent from operations. Thank you for that question. Next would be all the design control activity records, your design reviews, your design verification, your design validation, how you released the design to the manufacturing process, all the risk management, risk assessment and FMEA, and design change records. All of these become part of your quality record compilation, so to speak. That during the design activity, you may have different phases where you have a development phase, where you have a pre-production phase, a prototype phase, to a production phase. So in order to go from phase to phase, there has to be some kind of record that says, yes, we met the requirements of the design input phase, and here is the record that shows that we met all of the requirements of our development plan, which is part of the device master record, but the items that show that we met those and the records of those outputs would become quality records. For verification and validation, again, verification is a design function, so to speak. Validation is to make sure that the user requirements have all been met. So design validation is normally done independent from the design group. Design validation is more of a quality assurance function than an engineering function. And then design release would be all those disciplines, your engineering group, your materials group, your quality group, your manufacturing group. They would all sign off that this design is ready to be released for commercial distribution. And included in that would be any risk assessment. As you change the design, you have to consider what is the effect to my risk of this device. So you may have to go back and touch your FMEA again. Are we adding a new function as part of this design change? Do I need to add another risk that I need to mitigate before this change can go through and be placed into commercial distribution? And obviously, changes need to be validated and tested. And depending on the level of the change, it would depend on the level of the verification and validation that needs to be done. Not every design change requires a full validation. And again, you have to consider software in this whole process as well. If you have products with software in it, is it separate as a product, i.e. using third-party software? And third-party software has become another big target item during the audit and investigation process. People that use, for instance, Microsoft Windows as their basis for their device. So where do you draw the line for what service packs you're going to use? Are you going to allow the end user to do automatic updates? In some cases, a new service pack may disable your user interface. So you have to think about all these things as you go through design changes. Some things are just normal bug fixes. Other things may affect the device significantly as part of the change that's being implemented. So design control activity obviously is a big part of the quality records, and it's normally some area that obviously your notified body will look at, but it's an area that's been scrutinized by the FDA quite a bit during their visits over the last 10 years. But as part of the QSIT audit program that they do complaints, they do CAPA, and then they have to pick one other area. Well, over the last 10 years, that other area has either been design control or manufacturing, because those are areas that are easy. Manufacturing is an easy area for an FDA investigator to look at because it's something they've been familiar with for many years. However, now they're trending towards looking at supplier control outside of manufacturing and design control. So that's just something to be aware of. Some of you may have already been through that as part of your last FDA audit. Next would be your document control act. The operational documents obviously are all those op docs, SOPs that implement the quality management system. Those are outside of the product structure. So it's, your incoming inspection procedure, your audit procedure, your complaint handling procedure. You're all familiar with what operational documents. So the review and the release of those documents would be a quality record. Who reviewed it, who released it, and any changes require the same disciplines to do the review again, to go through the change. Product document reviews, again, if you do an ECO to your specifications, to your product itself, that document review, that ECO, who signed off on the ECO, you need to have obviously an SOP in place, but not every ECO, not every engineering change is going to require all of the same signatures. If it's just a document change where you have a mistake made on an assembly drawing for something, that doesn't require the same disciplines to sign off something where you're adding a new feature to a product. So again, the level of review would depend on the level of the change or of the document that's being reviewed. Your document change control procedure, that will be included as part of the quality record review. And document use control, what happens when when you release a new document and it has to be put out to the floor? How does that get relayed to the people who have to use those particular documents? So how do you remove obsolete documents from the floor? And how do you include customer documentation or even customer supplied materials into this program or into your product? So any customer documentation, you ought to have an SOP that shows how that documentation gets included into your quality management system. And again, the reviews of that, the reviews of the release of that documentation is a quality record. Regulatory filings, and this is something that is under my discipline. Any 510K or PMA submissions are quality records. The FDA doesn't typically look at your 510K because they have, obviously, when you submit those things to the FDA for their review prior to your pre-market commercialization, that they've already looked at it. Any investigational device exemption submissions, those types of things. Your MDD technical files, any of you selling product to the EU or even to Health Canada, you're going to have technical file reviews. And any other foreign requirements such as, China compulsory certification, things of that nature. All of these become quality records. One particular point to look at here is if you make a change to a product, is that change going to be significant enough where you have to resubmit a new 510K? Obviously, a PMA, any changes you have to submit a supplemental PMA document to the FDA. And technical files. How do these design changes affect your technical files? If you change a user manual, for instance, the labeling, that's part of your MDD technical file. So obviously, the MDD technical file is going to have to be updated for any changes that you make associated with that. And in other foreign requirements, again, now with the global marketplace, between Australia and Japan, South America, China, all of these countries pretty much have the same documentation, but the format that you submit to them is obviously always different. So in my line of business, as regulatory affairs, I have to keep up with, what do I have to submit to this country? What do I have to submit to that country? Although the same set of documents go, it's just the matter of how it's compiled and how it's sent out. But again, the thing that I want to stress here is that changes made to your product, those quality records representing those changes may impact these regulatory filings that you've made. Purchasing documents. This gets back to how you control your suppliers. Included in your quality records will be purchase orders, the terms and conditions associated with that purchase order. Supplier quality plans. If you have a particular part that has a high risk associated with when it gets incorporated into your device, you may want to have a separate supplier quality plan for that particular product so that it's spelled out front. If you change a raw material, if you change one of your suppliers, if you change your process, you need to let me know before you do this so that it doesn't impact my product after the fact when I get it into the production process. What the conformance requirements. We now have, RoHS and REACH and all these other environmental considerations worldwide now that have to be put into place. So do you have any conformance requirements on that end? I have a question. What if purchasing is done by corporate and not by the plant? Again, you as the end user, whoever is the market maker of the device, is ultimately responsible for the supplier of that device. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from your facility or if it's coming from a corporate facility. Whoever is the market maker of the device or the product has the ultimate responsibility of controlling the supplier. Now, in some cases, you may have internal suppliers. And a question or the point that was brought up at the conference last week was that you may have an internal division, for instance, that just does your printed circuit boards. They may not be physically in the same facility as you, but they may be a sister facility that's down the street or across town. If they aren't specifically included in your internal audits, then you need to have a separate supplier audit associated with that facility, even though it's part of your own corporation. So if purchasing is done by corporate and not by the manufacturing facility, again, it's the person who is designated as the market maker, who holds the 510K, who holds the CE mark, who holds the CCC mark for the device that's going into the marketplace. Those people, that organization is ultimately responsible for the suppliers of the components that are going into the finished device. We're also here for quality records under purchasing would be any test result requirements. If you're going to have either source inspection done there by your own people, or if you're going to require them to supply you with test results, it may be, the purity of raw materials. It may be, voltages. It may be critical dimensions on a mechanical part. Those would be spelled out again either on your specific drawings or in the supplier quality plans that these test results have to be supplied when they supply you the product. And again, consultants and contractors, those two are specifically spelled out in the FDA quality system regulation that you need to have the control over any consultants or contractors that you use. You may subcontract a whole product and have it come back in, you package it and ship it out. you need to really make sure that that contractor is under very, very good control, and that they have the records for your device history record, or even for the device master record that they used for traceability purposes. And again, consultants have to be qualified for their capabilities. Any supplier that you want to use, there's a couple of things that are always there. Do they have the technical capability to perform the service that you want them to perform, whether it be a service, whether it be a manufacturing process? And do they have the viability from a business standpoint? Are they going to be there in 6 months? So somebody that's making a very important part for your device, you really ought to go see, and maybe you ought to see them more than once a year, as things, as you get a relationship going with that particular supplier, then maybe you can lay back on how often you go see them. But something that's a critical component contained in your device, you really need to have control over. It may be good to visit these people on a regular basis. Field service records. These are another part of quality records that are often looked at because of the post-market surveillance process that is required by either ISO or FDA. What are your preventive maintenance records? Were there emergency service calls, and were these emergency service calls required for safety issues? If it was a safety issue, then there may be a recall involved. So you have to not only maintain these records of when they were done, where they were done, why were they performed, but what was performed and who performed them, and that's spelled out in the FDA requirements as well. So again, the level of detail that you keep in your device history records, it will only help you if there is a recall necessity. So in other words, if you don't know what lot of a particular component is in the last 6 months worth of devices that you shipped out, then instead of recalling just those that have had 10 or 15 components, 10 or 15 defective components, you'll end up recalling the whole lot. So that's one thing that you should really take care in looking at when you set up your device history record. Again, we're talking about quality records here, but the device history record, those items that are in there as quality records, you need to determine what level of detail you need to go for recall. Preventive maintenance is another area, and service records as to determine whether or not, is it a complaint? For instance, there's the school of thought out there that if something fails prior to the warranty period being up, that you may have to consider that a customer complaint because you failed to meet specifications. If you say, we warranty this for a year, or we warranty this for 6 months, and obviously out-of-box failures are very important to determine what the issue was. But if something fails in a 3-month period or a 4-month period, and you're consistently seeing this, then at some point you may want to roll this up into a complaint and treat it as such, so that there's some corrective action put into place to deter this reliability issue that you may have. And again, this reliability issue may trigger a design change that in itself triggers a new 510K. So you have to roll all these back up into the top to see what effect a field service quality record may have. And these are very important as well for future products. What did we see when we built the last product for field service? Did we have continuous problems with a certain area of the product, or did it run smoothly? Can we keep the same design for a future product, or is this something that we need to change? And again, excuse me, software updates are another consideration in field service records as to whether or not a voluntary recall is necessary, because if you're saying, I'm going to make this software update, and by the way, all the product we have in the field, we're going to put this software upgrade into, and that can be considered a recall in some cases. So you have to be very careful when you're doing so-called bug fixes or reliability enhancements to your product to make sure that it wasn't actually a recall. No, I mean, you would be the one that would have to defend it to the FDA when they come in and went through your quality records. So just something to give you to think about. Calibration records, I mean, these are easy targets for any auditor. Any auditor going through, I mean, I have been a quality auditor in my past history, and calibration records were always an easy target. You go through, you pick up a meter, you pick up a caliper, you pick up reagents, you pick up Loctite, and looking at the dates. These are easy areas, and so the quality records associated with calibration are something that are easily controlled and should be frequently looked at least on a monthly basis. Have somebody go out and make sure products that need to be calibrated or equipment that needs to be calibrated has the calibration sticker it's required. If not, it's sent out for calibration. And again, traceability if it's required, the data calibration. One thing I want to stress here is if you get an out of tolerance report from your calibration house, and this means that, hopefully you're familiar with this, this means that when they went to do the calibration, they found one segment, or they found the unit to be way out of tolerance in a certain area. And if you look and say, well, the last time we had this calibrated was 6 months ago, so you would have to look at least the last 6 months worth of product that you may have released based on the results of this unit, and see if any corrective action is required. Do you need to bring those back and take a look at them to make sure that they actually that the product did pass when they were tested with this out of calibration equipment. So someone in your quality organization, or someone, maybe if you have the luxury of an in-house calibration laboratory, someone should be responsible for addressing any out of tolerance reports as they come in to come into your factory. Let me see here. Okay, training records. This is another area where there seems to be a lot of difficulty in maintaining these properly. A job description is a training record. Whatever job function you have on the floor, there should be a job description associated with that. And with that job description should come training requirements. What the frequency of retraining is. And one FDA requirement, which is often overlooked, is 21 CFR 820.25, which states, as part of their training, personnel shall be made aware of device defects which may occur from the improper performance of their jobs. So you need to let your assemblers know, or even the engineers and your quality assurance people, or the people that are releasing the product for distribution, what can happen to this, what are the results of this product if it leaves the building with defects. If it's a high-risk device, there could be a very risky safety issue associated with it. If it's a low-risk device, it may have as much impact. But the training should include making people aware of what device defects, what the outcome of those if they don't perform their jobs properly. And any external training records, if people are required to go out and be certified to a certain soldering technique, if you need to have people know how to operate a clean room properly, those types of external training records, those all become part of your quality records as well. And training is an area where I know that our notified body spends a lot of time, especially with new hires, so that your SOP associated with training should define at what intervals a person coming on board should have training regarding what your quality system is, what are you following, and if you're in the FDA regulated industry, that there is definite training to the FDA requirements within, say, 60 days of hiring a new employee, so that they're aware of what the FDA requirements are. Now, this can be a very high-level training for, for administrative personnel. It could be specific just to manufacturing people, just the FDA requirements for manufacturing people. Obviously, engineering personnel should go through the design control requirements so that they're aware of the FDA regulations. And again, any external training, if you send somebody out as part of their job description, if they're required to go out, that those records should be maintained. Training records are also a good spot for an auditor to find mistakes very easily. Getting back to contract review, again, these aren't in any particular order, but contract review records. And contract review may be as simple as a purchase order comes in, they want to buy 15 of a particular item. Who's required to review that? What are your quality management system requirements? What are the regulatory requirements on that contract? Are you going to require that your supplier maintain an ISO13485 system, and that they have to have a certificate that they supply you annually? What do you do about conflicting terms? If the supplier says, well, you're requiring me to meet, this 4 decimal tolerance, my equipment is not capable of doing that. So how do you resolve conflicting terms as part of your contract review? And again, technological indifferences. We don't have the technology to do that. So these situations again go back into the supplier controls. And on the other side of the contract, between you and your suppliers, there's the other side of the contract, which is between you and your customers, and these same situations should be reviewed and, again, become part of the quality records. This is one of the areas that's also looked at by your notified body and by the FDA as they come in and go through their audits or their investigations. So I think the last one here is inspection and test records, and these are pretty easy to keep and maintain. Incoming inspection, in-process inspection, final acceptance, product release records. If you're using off-the-shelf software to perform any of these, you have to make sure that they're validated. I'm sure Microsoft is not going to tell validated Access or Excel to be used in a medical device. So that if you're going to use an Excel spreadsheet, there has to be some record of validation that that spreadsheet actually does what you want it to do. So these are things to keep in mind as part of the inspection and test process. Again, obviously, you need to keep the current revisions of the procedures, the current revision of the data capture sheets, those types of things. Again, are easy areas for auditors to find mistakes. So as we move on here into CAPA, here would be non-conforming material, would require corrective action, internal CAPA, external CAPA, SCARs, what are you doing for supplier corrective action request, rework or repair of work in process, and any supplier rework or repair that's done. There is a good draft document that was just released by the Global Harmonization Task Force on CAPA, and there's 3 interesting definitions in there. One of them is corrections, and a correction is obviously something you do to fix something that you have in hand. A corrective action they define as an action that is performed to something that is known to be incorrect, and you are taking an action to prevent it from happening again, and preventive action they defined as, preventive action they define as something that's done up front as part of the quality system to keep nonconformities from happening. So I thought that was three very interesting definitions, and you can go up to the GHTF website, and that would be under Study Group 3 for that CAPA document. Complaint records are obviously something that the FDA is going to look at each and every time they come into your facility, and especially if you've had any MDRs associated with your product. Safety-related complaints should be kept separate. MDRs obviously should be kept separate in a separate file, whether you use an electronic method for this or whether you use a paper format. And then you have internal complaints, external complaints. Are you doing the complaints in a timely response, and do you have timely closure to your complaints? So the complaint records, very important part of the quality system records, especially for future designs and for management review and for customer relations. Your customers are going to want to know that you're keeping good records on complaints and that you're handling them in a timely manner. Risk management records, we can go through this pretty quick. We're getting close to the end here. Those of you who obviously are familiar with 14971, there is all the records associated with your risk management, the risk management plan, your risk analysis, mitigation records, risk management report, post-market. And again, I want to stress the fact that you have to perform risk management on any design changes, that it may have to go through this whole loop again in order to be a viable change that can be properly documented, and you have the records behind it to show that you did due diligence in making sure that the change did not introduce any new risks into the product. Process validation records. Special processes are those where the results of a process cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection. These would be things like soldering, sterilization, those types of things. Special processes have to be performed by qualified individuals. There has to be continual control reviews, and any process changes or deviations have to be recorded, and those would become part of your quality records as well. So process validation records are included in the quality record process. And then if you're doing any electronic signatures, the whole ball of wax from Part 11 compliance comes in. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Part 11 compliance, and again, that's a whole other session on itself, but just wanted to put this in here to make sure that the electronic signatures have to have the same controls as any other signature, and in fact more controls, and that those electronic signatures are also quality records that can be looked at as they go through your quality management system process. So for reference and guidance here, there's the 21 CFR, 1345 obviously, and what I left off here that should be on here are those from the GHTF, the Global Harmonization Task Force. They have some very good reference documents, and hopefully within the next couple of decades we can all roll into one system so we don't have to do something different for every country in the world, and that's the goal of the GHTF. There are some very good documents there related to auditing of suppliers, to supplier control. Like I say, there's a new one on CAPA that they're looking for comments on, so please take the time to go to the GHTF website and look at their documentation. Now I would like to open up to some questions if there is time. I can supply all the time that is necessary if anyone has any questions.
Chuck, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and I would also like to thank all the participants for cooperating with us. It is now time for the Q&A to begin, and we request all who have questions per presenter to use the raise hand option, which is right below the participants panel, if you'd like to ask your questions verbally, or you could send us your questions to your Q&A panel or through the chat panel. And Chuck, I have a question here. I'm going to send it to you by chat. It's from Abel. Chuck, I've sent you a question. Hello? Chuck, you with us?
I'm sorry. That's better. If I take myself off mute, you'll be able to hear me. Does the traceability need to be to NIST? That depends on the article that you have for calibration. If you have some in-house built test equipment, it doesn't necessarily have to be traceable to NIST, but you may have like a golden sample that you put on there, or even a sample that has known defects on it, so that you can know that that test fixture is performing in the manner that it should be. Anything that is a measuring device, such as calipers or voltage sources or voltmeters, ohm meters, those types of things, you really should have a traceability to a cal lab, and that cal lab should have traceability to NIST for the standards that they used. So there's primary standards, secondary standards, tertiary standards that way. So if you're using a tertiary standard, then it should have been calibrated by a secondary standard, and that secondary standard should be calibrated by a primary standard. So the traceability doesn't necessarily have to be there at your facility, but it should be at the facility that's performing the calibration, if that particular piece of equipment is required to be calibrated, like I say, outside of your facility.
Right, thank you very much, Chuck. And
okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, if any further questions, you could either send it to me by chat, or if you'd like to ask your questions verbally, you can use the raise hand feature, which is right below the participants panel. And in the meantime, I would request you sincerely to give us your feedback, which you might already see on your screen. Just a couple of questions, 6 questions, and it wouldn't take more than a minute to complete it. Chuck, I don't see any questions coming in with your permission.
Okay, yeah, I see one that says, is there a guideline to follow for supplier risk assessment? That one came in earlier in the webinar. I believe that the GHTF document on supplier controls has a good outline on supplier risk assessment. So if you, this came from Abel Cortez, if you go to that website, which is ghtf.org, you should be able to find the study group that works with supplier assessment, and you should be able to find a good document there.
And Chuck, with your permission, could we conclude the session?
Sure. If there aren't any more questions, I apologize for a little bit of background noise, but my son made it home from school and was making a run through the house. So I apologize for the background noise, and hopefully this was informative to you. If at any time you have any further questions, please contact me through Compliance Panel, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions at that time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are very grateful for you taking part in this webinar. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can send us an email to webinars@compliancepanel.com. And if any of you feel that your team members or colleagues, friends might benefit from this event, we are happy to inform that it will be available in the recorded format and can be purchased from our website, or you could call us at 800-447-9407. 714-441-5856. We welcome your suggestions, feedbacks, or ideas on how we can improve our webinar. If you'd like to suggest a topic or desire customized corporate training online or on-site, we ensure that whatever is your training necessity, it will be a priority. We look forward to having you with us again sometime soon and for your continued patronage. And on behalf of our presenter, Mr. Cefalo, and the compliance panel team, I would like to say thank you for participating in this webinar and wish you a pleasant day ahead.